Maomao bowed her head in return. Suyan led them to a room where Jinshi, Basin and Lahan were waiting. The bespectacled little man wore a noticeable grimace. These events had weakened him. Jinshi said, "I assume you know why we have called you here." His complexion wasn't very good. Maomao suspected he was overworking himself again. She would need to get him to take a nap before she went home. She would use force if necessary. "Does this have to do with Consort Island?" Maomao asked. "Indeed it does. We would like to begin by hearing from Sir Liumen. He obviously wasn't going to waste time on pleasantries. I'm afraid I can only speak to what happened with Yao, the medical assistant." That wasn't true, Maomao thought. Well, it was and it was. Her father was a very careful person. What he meant was that he could only speak with confidence about what had happened to Yao. All else would be assumption, and Liumen didn't like to speculate. Her symptoms were severe. These included stomach cramps, vomiting and diarrhea. Their condition seemed to stabilize for a time but then worsened again. Currently, though they have improved, this matched what Maomao had heard. The symptoms were exactly those of incense powder poisoning. However, the severity of their presentation and the way the symptoms worsened after initially subsiding puzzled her. Incense powder contained shikimi, a highly toxic substance that could potentially kill someone. The berries were especially poisonous. However, incense powder was produced by grinding up only the skin of the fruit and the leaves. She would have noticed if she had eaten enough of it to get that sick. Maomao had given Yao some pointers on how to look for poison in food. This included sniffing it for any unusual odors. Yao's color hadn't been good even before the meal. Perhaps her nose had been stuffed up. Her father's next words confirmed Maomao's suspicion. He suspected they were dealing with a mycotoxin, something from a mushroom or fungus. It was not shikimi poison. Liu Umen's audience was dumbfounded. What he was saying contradicted all their assumptions. They certainly brought him here to finalize the case against Eileen. They must have believed they had gathered all the evidence they required. "I understand now," Maomao said. It all made sense to her. Many fungal toxins were far more powerful than shikimi, although they caused similar symptoms. And Yao would not have recognized the smell or flavor of most toxic mushrooms. While everyone else was busy being shocked, Lahan leaned forward. "Are you suggesting Consort Island was framed? Tell me, uncle." There was an unmistakable note of giddiness in his voice, and he had good reason to feel that way. If someone he had brought to Li committed a crime like this, some of the responsibility would fall on him. This entire situation was outside even Lahan's calculations. Liumen replied, "I am saying only that we are not dealing with poisonous incense powder here." His roundabout way of talking was clearly frustrating those listening. "May I interject?" Maomao asked, hoping to move things along with her own observations. She laid out the facts, trying to be as objective as possible. She did not want to be carried away by what her father had said. The shrine maiden and the other food taster showed very similar symptoms. They experienced stomach pain and vomiting. Their symptoms were less severe than Yao's, and they recovered in about 3 days. I question whether a mycotoxin caused this illness. She thought the shrine maiden and her attendant did not eat enough to experience the effects they did. She believed the symptoms appeared too quickly. The symptoms did remind her of the toxic Amanita virosa mushroom. That mushroom was extremely poisonous, but it acted slowly. The terrible thing was that by the time the effects of the toxin began to show, it had already been absorbed by the body. That is why it could seem to be cured, only for the symptoms to recur. Maomao didn't question her father's treatment of Yao. However, if it was true that a poisonous fungus was involved, then the case had to be considered more serious than an episode of shikimi poisoning. It had occurred to Maomao that they might be dealing with a poisonous mushroom. She had dismissed the possibility because, if that were the case, symptoms should have appeared in about 6 hours. The 3 women had shown signs of poisoning much earlier. "I am sure my old man must know that," she thought. So why would he say such a thing? He must have a reason. Could it be that they consumed the mushrooms before the food tasting? Before she knew what she was doing, Maomao slammed her hands down on the table. The conversation took place in the shrine maiden's villa. How could she not have noticed? "Master Jinshi," she said, "what is it? Did you tell the shrine maiden that Consort Island was suspected of poisoning her? I don't want to tell her anything until we are certain." It would only create unnecessary anxiety. Yes, of course. And yet the attendant at the villa had spoken of it. The trouble is of the heart. How could she feel well, given who is involved? She might have become the next shrine maiden once. Maomao had assumed from that exchange that the shrine maiden already knew who the suspect was. Maomao was aware of this herself, so she hadn't been surprised the shrine maiden knew as well. But she wondered how the shrine maiden knew. Now Maomao understood why Yao's case had been so severe. She also understood why the cases of the shrine maiden and her attendant had been much lighter. She could explain the delay in when her symptoms began. "Dad," she began, giving him a serious look, "would it be all right if I offered some speculation?" He seemed uncomfortable. "You will have to be prepared to be held accountable for what you say." Once the words were out of her mouth, she wouldn't be able to take them back. "Sometimes one must speak anyway," she said. Her father was silent then. Maomao took that as permission. Jinchi said, "Sounds like you have something for us." "Yes, sir, although it is only one possibility. Perhaps making that clear would give her a way out if she needed it." Perhaps she was simply not willing to speak with absolute confidence. "I believe it was not Consort Island who planted the poison." "Why so?" Jinchi was never going to simply take her word for it. He wanted reasons. Lahan and Basin were likewise watching her. "If we accept what my old man Ahem, what Dr. Kan suggested, that the case involves a poisonous mushroom, it becomes difficult to believe that Consort Island tainted the food. Considering the time symptoms took to appear, the victims would have had to consume a significant amount." Virosa had been watching Eileen long before the banquet. Eileen was under guard from the moment she left the rear palace. Even when her lady-in-waiting left her alone, she could not leave her room. She had no confederates to help her. She could not have poisoned the food before the banquet. So who did then? If the food was indeed poisoned, sir, it would have happened at the villa. Yao had been living with the shrine maiden for days before the banquet, eating the same food as she did. It made the most sense to assume Yao had been exposed to the poison while still at the residence. That narrowed down the list of possible perpetrators. I believe it was one of the shrine maiden's attendants. In other words, she poisoned herself. This drew fresh consternation from the listeners. All except Liumen remained impassive. He would likely have reached the same conclusion, but he remained true to his reluctance to speculate. If the poisoning was essentially a show, it would explain why the shrine maiden and her attendant had less severe symptoms than Yao. Yao would have been the only one to seriously consume the poison. The other two would have taken only enough to put on a convincing performance, or perhaps they used a different, less serious toxin. This same reasoning could explain how the attendant knew who the alleged perpetrator was without being told. It seemed this had all been done to pin the crime on Eileen. She and the shrine maiden had known each other for a long time. The maiden would know about her old friend's fondness for incense powder. It was poisonous incense powder. Maomao understood why her father insisted on not working on assumptions. However, some things could push even Maomao over the edge. They had to drag Yao into this. They callously used her. The seriousness of Yao's symptoms would support the idea of an attempted poisoning. Yao could be a little condescending, but at heart she was a decent young lady. She was dedicated to her studies. Maomao was not in, but this was enough to make her bile well up in her throat. She belatedly noticed the numbness in her hands. It made her stop and ask herself whether she was speaking rationally. Liu Men was still silent, while Jinchi was practically slack-jawed. "I have a question," said Basin, speaking for the first time. He reacted quickly in situations like this. Why would the shrine maiden want to entrap Consort Eileen? Lahan said, raising his hand, "I believe I have an idea. Consort Eileen told me she thought the shrine maiden might have borne a child, and that it might have been the White Lady. I asked Maomao if she could tell whether the shrine maiden had given birth. If it turned out the shrine maiden was no longer qualified for her office, she could be stripped of it. She might even be punished. Was the shrine maiden the mother of the White Lady? That would be explosive, Jinchi said. It would mean that Eileen had sought political asylum for more than just her enemies in the government. She knew something about the shrine maiden's secret as well. It would also explain why the shrine maiden had followed her to Li. But if all of this was to keep Consort Eileen quiet, Maomao said. Lahan's suggestion should have seemed perfectly reasonable, yet something about it nagged at her. She looked at her father. He sat there in silence, neither affirming nor denying anything. Chapter 18, A Man and a Woman Play the Game. Jinshi asked Maomao, "You are not going home with Sir Liumen?" She had stayed behind and was boiling some water. "You seem awfully pale, Master Jinshi. How many days has it been since you last got a proper sleep?" She asked him a question in return. She mixed some herbs into the water, herbs that would help him sleep, and passed him a cup. Lahan had left with Liumen. Basin went to see them off. "I have been sleeping every night," Jinshi retorted. "Let's try a different question. How many total hours have you slept in the last several days?" Jinshi started counting on his fingers. He did not seem likely to get through an entire hand of cards. He scowled and drank the tea. "Will you be leaving early tomorrow morning?" she asked. "No, for once things are relatively quiet. In fact, today is the first day I have been able to return to my palace in some time. So he really was working hard. Lady Suken must be worried about you. And you are not," Jinshi said, the cup still at his lips. He loosened the chest of his robe. This prompted Maomao to look around for some sleepwear. Suhen entered at exactly that moment, thankfully. No sooner had she handed Maomao a set of nightwear than she showed herself out again. "Does he want me to help him change?" She had done it before, back when she was serving in Jinshi's residence, but she had never liked it. Maomao thought Jinshi could dress himself. Jinshi firmly believed he should be assisted with everything. The two never agreed. However, Jinshi held a higher status than Maomao. She had to give in. She put his sleepwear on him almost as he dropped his cloak. She tossed the belt around his waist, tied it loosely, and then collected the garment from the floor. "Do you make Nen do this for you as well?" she grumbled. "No, it happens that I do not, but you have her tie up your hair." Maomao considered that to be part of helping him change, "That I do, but always under Suken's supervision. Always, to forestall the possibility of a swift stab from behind." "She would never," Maomao began to say, but she stopped. In a state of extreme Yao deprivation, it was hard to tell what Nen might do. "Suhen can be overprotective. She has never even left us alone in a room together. Yet here were Jinshi and Maomao in exactly that situation." Maomao said nothing. Jinshi said, "Sugen thinks quite highly of you." Maomao replied, "That is not my fault." Being high in Sugen's esteem carried no benefits for Maomao. She found it difficult to think of one good thing that might come of it. She took the empty teacup and was about to leave. However, Jinshi caught her wrist. "You are always trying to put me off," he said. "I cannot imagine what you mean, sir. Staying in this room was dangerous." She wanted to leave while she still could, but he wouldn't let her go. "Sugen feels quite urgently that I should take a consort of my own," he said. "She claims it would mean less work for me. I'm sure she is right." Maomao was intent on acting as if the matter didn't concern her. That could only make Jinshi more upset. "You know what I'm trying to say. How can you act so indifferent? Are you that desperate to avoid me?" She began to say yes. She slapped a hand over her mouth, but it was too late. "Were you about to say yes? Pay it no mind, sir." Jinshi glared at her. He had dark bags under his eyes. He should stop wasting time with me and get some sleep. He was obviously exhausted, and she wished she could order him to go to bed. But Jinshi was still talking. He said, "I can see why Sir Liumen looks so harassed all the time. I can practically understand how our honored strategist must feel." Maomao's ears started ringing. Jinshi was tired and she knew that. He had nowhere to vent his frustrations. He had a great many frustrations to vent, and on top of that he was suffering from lack of sleep. At any other time he might have been more careful. He might have known not to say what he said, but he said it nonetheless. Strangely, it wasn't the mention of the strategist that upset Maomao the most. It was the name Liumen that kept reverberating in her mind. Today she had experienced something rare, a difference of opinion with her father. Jinshi had quickly noticed it. Perhaps he wasn't the only one who was tired. Maomao had not been sleeping well herself. Finally, she spoke her mind. "You are always telling me I need to use my words, Master Jinshi, but are you in any position to criticize? Everything you say to me and everything you do feels calculated. It's as if you're trying to avoid actually saying what you mean. You make me figure it all out. You know, you remind me of someone. You act exactly like a man who used to visit our brothel frequently. He was in love with one of the girls, but he never simply said it. He believed it should be obvious from his actions. He was so certain he had a good relationship with this woman that he never sent her even a letter. I remember how forlorn he looked when someone else took her away. He kept coming to the brothel after that, to get drunk and whine to the ladies. In my opinion, he could have avoided all that heartbreak if he had told the woman how he felt. It was clear, unequivocal, so she knew where they stood. It was the least he could have done. Everything came out in a torrent. She felt like she'd said it all in one breath. It was strange, she thought, to hear so many words come from her own mouth. She was mystified. Jinchi was no less startled, but the shock soon left his face. It was replaced by something else. He got up from the bed and stared down at Maomao. Now he had done it. She had given him a piece of her mind and he was about to give her one back. Should he be clear? Unequivocal, should I say what I mean? If I did, would you actually listen to me? Is that what you are telling me? I'm going to hold you to that right this minute. I will say it all. Do not plug your ears, listen to me. He grabbed her hands as she was trying to put her fingers in her ears. He took a breath. He was looking at Maomao, but he seemed almost embarrassed. Finally he managed to say, now listen to me. I mean, Maomao, listen closely. I am going to make you my wife. He had said it. He had actually said it. To her it sounded like a death sentence. His vagueness and ambiguity had been a kindness to Maomao. Because of her social status, his words were like commands. She could not argue with them, nor could she contradict his wishes. Jinchi was blushing, but Maomao was completely pale. I wish there were an immortal here who could turn back time, she mumbled. Your internal monologue is showing, Jinchi snapped. He could not quite bring himself to meet her eyes, yet he had not let go of her wrists. A profoundly uncomfortable feeling hung between them. He sighed at length. Be that as it may, you are right. Making you my wife with things as they stand could only harm you. Neither of us wants that. He took a sip from the pitcher by the bedside, trying to bring down his flush. For you, I will remove every obstacle that keeps us apart. One day, just know that. With that, Jinchi buried himself under the covers. I won't let what you fear come to pass, he swore. Soon she heard him breathing evenly in sleep. What I fear, Maomao pictured Empress Gyukayu. I don't think Master Jinchi knows, she thought. She did not think he was aware of the secret of his own birth. What about Empress Gyukayu? Does she know? And what did His Majesty want for Jinchi? What about our duo? It is never good to know too much. When Jinchi discovered the truth, would he still try to find a way to make things palatable to Maomao? She was not the only one concerned. Could he create circumstances that would stave off talk from everyone around them? No, even he could not do that. It was difficult, if not impossible, to manufacture a situation that pleased everyone. It only got harder the further you went up the social ladder. Maomao shook her head and made to leave the room. At the doorway she ran into Suken. Suken was smiling and giving her a thumbs up for some inexplicable reason. All Maomao could do was glare at the old lady as she went by. Chapter 19, The Truth Behind the Truth. For several days there was no word from Jinchi. Maomao did not believe her speculations were beyond questioning. She also did not think it had been a mistake to contradict her old man. The case of the attempted poisoning of the shrine maiden continued, and Eileen remained the prime suspect. When questioned, Eileen confessed. She said her reason for coming to Lee was that she hadn't wanted to, but had been forced to. She also held a grudge against the shrine maiden, who she blamed for her departure. Eileen might have become the shrine maiden herself. She had been raised to be one, if the current shrine maiden hadn't held the position for so long. To openly confess her dislike for both the shrine maiden and Lee itself, she must have been truly desperate. Adding the Emperor's name to the list would make her the most hated woman in Lee. Currently, the story was that a lazy foreigner had attacked the shrine maiden because of a personal grudge. That was simple enough and convenient. Bullshit. The word was out of her mouth before she could stop herself. Lahan was giving her the lowdown. This wasn't something that could be handled by messenger, so he had summoned her under the pretext that he needed some kind of medicine. You're telling me, he replied as he downed some stomach medication. Maomao was somewhat surprised to realize belatedly that even he could have an upset stomach sometimes. I believe this is as strange as you do. The consort told me herself how much she respects the shrine maiden, and now she hates her enough to try to kill her. He shook his head and sighed deeply. Regarding that young woman, how is she doing? Yao, or whatever her name is. Lahan felt guilty about what had happened to her, as she was at least partly responsible for the entire affair. She escaped with her life, but I think there may be aftereffects. Yao had gotten much better under Liu Humen and Enen's care. She was not completely recovered, and she was also distraught to learn she had ingested poison without realizing it. Maomao did not blame her. Poisonous mushrooms could be surprisingly delicious, and she had been about to say so when her father gently stopped her. He appeared to doubt it would be as comforting as she expected. Maomao visited the shrine maiden each day to check on her progress. However, to be frank, she wasn't certain if the woman was truly sick. If she was simply pretending to be ill, then Maomao didn't need to ask so many questions about her condition. In fact, doing so might make her seem like she was helping to blame Eileen.